Trump and Elon might be beefing over the big, beautiful bill, but the Trump economy is trucking along. We'll have Jim Rickards break down the great American comeback.
I'm trusting in the plan, Jill, or maybe I'm just trying to calm everyone down after yesterday's fiasco.
Well, speaking of plans, Marco Rubio and Vance are looking ahead, and it's not just 5 years, 10 years, but actually 20 years into the future for the MAGA agenda.
Yeah, I can imagine the CNN headline as Trump announces 2044 campaign, but in actuality, they're talking about some of the most important issues that anyone's talking about anywhere.
And is intellectual a slur in the MAGA universe? Well, we'll showcase where the cultural needle is shifting in the clip of the week.
You don't need fancy titles to prove you're smart. Just ask Dr. Jill Biden.
It's Friday, people. Let's have some fun. Blaze News, The Mandate starts right now. Good evening, Patriots. I'm Jill Savage, joined as always by Editor-in-Chief Matthew Peterson.
Great to be here, Jill. This is a weekend where I've been thwarted twice in a row, but I hope to get out on the water tomorrow.
Well, there is a big fight going on in D.C. right now. It's anything but beautiful. We'll get into all of that. But first, let's start with the tariffs, because we know they're already in place. They're already having an effect on the trade deficit and GDP. Let's take a look at Rick Santelli breaking it all down.
On the trade balance, and do remember, last week's advance only included goods. This one includes goods and services, comes in at minus 61.6 billion. That's about 5 billion less than we were expecting in terms of the deficit, but it does follow a revised 138 billion with a minus sign that was 140 billion. And that, of course, was an all-time record trade balance of goods and services. And as you can see, it has now been cut by more than half. And the big drop in imports seems to be where everyone's pointing. The big news there is how much it bolsters GDP. Just look at Atlanta Fed GDP now, which is at 4.64%.
It's a pretty big number. Here with more is Jim Rickards. He's an investment banker and author of MoneyGPT. So, Jim, thanks so much for coming back on the show. Remember all the legacy media outlets, they were going through and claiming that the Trump tariffs, they were going to tank the economy. So what's going on here? That's not the case right now at all from CNBC.
That's right, Joe. One of the reasons that the mainstream economists, who actually know very little about economics, they've got a lot of flawed models, but one of the reasons they were saying it was going to tank the economy, there were a couple of reasons. Number one, that tariffs would cause inflation because you put a tariff on a good that raises the price. That's going to cause inflation to consumers, and that's going to, then the Fed will have to keep interest rates where they are, maybe raise interest rates, and that was going to slow down the economy. Now, that's their analysis, but it's completely wrong, and here's why. When you have tariffs, basically you've got three parties involved. You've got an exporter, let's say they're in China, but it could be elsewhere. You've got an importer, and you've got a consumer who buys the end goods. So the three, maybe more, but at least three parties. The one who actually writes the check and pays the tariff is the importer. At the port of entry, they receive the goods, they got to pay the tariff, and that's that. But it doesn't end there. The question is, who actually bears the cost? Now, the mainstream economists are assuming that they would just pass along to the consumer, but that's not true. What happens is either the importer turns to the producer and says, hey, you have to lower your prices to me to make up for the tariff, or I have to take smaller margins. So maybe the importer and the exporter split it. They both have reduced margins and reduced revenues. The one place it does not go is to the consumer, because candidly, the consumer is a little bit tapped out right now. Credit card balances are up. Credit card defaults or delinquencies are up. Auto loan delinquencies are up. So if you could raise prices to consumers, you would just do it. You wouldn't need a tariff as an excuse. So the point being, tariffs don't cause inflation. They will not cause higher interest rates. There is a cost, but it gets pushed back to the producer or the importer. So it doesn't slow the economy the way the mainstream economists said.
So what do you think of the courts? I mean, right now we have the courts trying to block tariffs. Really all of Trump's agenda, it seems like. But particularly when it comes to tariffs, how big a deal is this with these activist judges standing in the way?
Well, in the short run, it's a big deal. In the long run, Trump is going to prevail. I should admit that in addition to being an economist, I'm also a lawyer, and I've studied this. The White House relies on something. It's a clunky name. It's called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977. So it's called IEPA for short. Funny name, but that's a very powerful law. So that's what Trump is relying on. Now, here's the thing about IEPA. I mean, I've read it. I've worked closely with it. I did a lot of this kind of work for CFIUS and the intelligence community. It was one of my specialties. It gives the president extraordinary powers. I call it dictatorial powers in the good sense of dictator. In the Roman Republic, it was actually in office. He had a 2-year term limit, and they called you in to deal with emergencies. Well, that's what we have here is an economic emergency. So basically, Trump has extremely broad powers. Now, you have this International Trade Court. Now, one of the federal district courts have said, the president has exceeded his power because if you read the statute, I've read it many times, it doesn't actually mention the word tariffs, but it doesn't have to. It says the president can have authority to do, seizes, freezes, basically do anything, block imports, block acquisitions of U.S. companies, take over U.S. companies, with compensation, extremely broad powers. The fact that it doesn't mention the word tariffs doesn't mean that tariffs would not be included. But here's the real point, Matthew, about why the courts are way out of line here. In the statute, there is room for, they specify congressional oversight. Meaning if the president uses this power, which he has many times, by the way, Biden administration used it all the time, all the sanctions on Russia would come under the same statute. But if the president uses the power and the Congress decided he has gone too far, within 60 days, the Congress can pass a resolution undoing what the president does. So your checks and balances are built in. The executive has extremely broad power, and the Congress has an ability to stop it if they don't like it. The courts have nothing to do with this. So the courts, both the International Trade Court and the District Court, were way out of line intervening on this. I'm confident that the Circuit Court, they've already stayed the application of this, and even if it goes to the Supreme Court, that Trump will prevail. But I agree with you. It's just one more example of these rogue, liberal, progressive, out of control judges telling the president what to do. But this, of all the statutes I can think of, this one gives the president some of the broadest authority I've ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, I love what you say there. I mean, the hope that I have is that actually as these decisions do get slapped down, and I think a lot of them will, that it resurrects Congress. Even if I disagree with what, Congress is doing, they don't really do much. So it'd be great, in this example you give, if, okay, you disagree, like, let's see you take some action. It'd be great to see a sign of life from Congress, Jim.
That's right. And by the way, even if the courts are right, I don't think they are right. I just want to be clear about that. This is going to get overturned. But even if they were, there are 5 other statutes, at least, that allow the president to do this. IEPA 1977 came in during the Carter administration. That was an update on something called the Trading with the Enemy Act of 1917. Woodrow Wilson used that in World War I to basically nationalize half the U.S. economy. So it's like, hey, you don't like IEPA? Fine. With congressional oversight? Fine. Let's go back to the Trading with the Enemy Act of 1917. It's still on the books. FDR used it to confiscate gold in 1933. I mean, I don't know who the enemy was in 1933, probably the American people. But my point is, there are numerous other statutes the president can use. So the president's going to win on this. It's just going to take a little time to sort it out.
All right. Well, unless you've been living under a rock, everybody knows that Elon and Donald Trump, they were battling it out online. Now, Jim, I know you've war game things for the Pentagon before, so you can see past the first few moves. So do that for us with the Elon Trump dynamic. How do you think this is going to potentially hurt the agenda moving forward, and what is at stake here?
I don't think it will hurt the MAGA agenda or the White House agenda. It's not going to slow down the what do they call it, the big beautiful bill or beautiful big bill, whatever it is. It's not going to slow that down. Trump is going to prevail. Candidly, I almost feel a little bit sorry for Elon Musk. He ends up as what they call the man without a country. He alienated the left and the progressives by hanging around the White House in Mar-a-Lago and being friends with Trump. Now he's alienated the MAGA group. Because he's, criticized Trump, he's called for impeachment, et cetera. So he's got no constituency left because he's alienated both sides. It does go to show that, look, I'll give Musk credit. He's some kind of genius, hard to know what kind, but he's some kind of genius, enormous industrial and technological accomplishments, and the world's richest man. Okay, that's 3 for 3. But he was kind of a little bit like Trump in his first term. He doesn't know Washington. Trump knows Washington now. because he's been elected twice, and he's I would say 3 times if you count 2020, but he certainly put a great team together, and he learned some lessons in the first term. Musk comes in, he doesn't understand Washington, doesn't really know how it works, and I say he's alienated both sides. The other thing is, either Elon got really bad advice, or sometimes when you're that rich and that powerful, your associates, they're kind of afraid to speak up to you. They just they're kind of yes men. I mean, holding the astronauts hostage was a really stupid move. He could have done a lot, to advance his position without saying, we're going to take a Dragon, that's a spaceship, SpaceX, offline, decommission it, and strand the astronauts. He reversed course on that today. So I guess someone finally got through to him and said, why are you holding astronauts hostage? Everyone loves astronauts. And by the way, they're people, we should care about them. So a little bit emotional, a couple of dumb moves on Elon's part, but Trump's going to win. I actually thought Trump was very restrained. Yeah, there were back and forth postings on X and name calling and all that, but Trump was the one who was kind of, trying to calm things down. Musk was a little bit out of line. So Trump's going to prevail. It's not going to derail the agenda. The loser in this, at least in the short run, is Musk. But I do expect that they'll kind of kiss and make up at some point.
That would be great. I think a lot of people in the audience would like to see that happen. I don't see how any way around it, really. There's a way in which they sort of need each other, or Musk needs a country, as you say. It was very unfortunate. I mean, I almost wish that Trump hadn't even said anything, publicly, but I certainly understand why he did. You just kind of let the autistic child go rant for a while, and I think he would calm down. But we will see. What about? I think that the big beautiful bill is moving forward regardless, and I don't want this to be a referendum on the big beautiful bill. I think that everyone is sort of prudentially like, yes, this needs to pass. We need to fund the agenda. But there is the larger issue, right, that Elon wasn't all wrong about, and that is spending in general. We all know that we're spending like drunken sailors. It was ironic that, Elon had to go out this way, really mouthing a talking point that comes from 70 years of people on the right? I mean, it was sort of interesting. Let's take a look at, his extreme version of this.
Because if the country goes insolvent, if all the money is just spent on paying interest on debt, there's no money left for anything.
Yeah.
So that's the reason I'm doing this, is because I was looking at the big picture here, and it's like, man, our debt's getting out of control. The interest payments, interest on the national debt now exceeds the entire Defense Department budget.
It's $1 trillion a year in
Yes.
interest, just to carry the money that we owe is $1 trillion a year.
Yes.
That is unbelievable.
And rising rapidly. A country is no different from a person. Country overspends, country goes bankrupt. Same as a person who overspends goes bankrupt. So it's not like optional to solve these things. It's essential.
We're going to go bankrupt.
Yes,
we are.
So look, outside of the big beautiful bill, big picture, I mean, you've been talking about this for a while now. I mean, how close are we to that point where interest payments alone break us?
Well, they actually won't. I mean, Musk has about criticism about spending and deficits being out of control. The question is, what is the definition of being in control? And Musk said something that was just dead wrong. He said, a company goes bankrupt, spends more than they make, they go bankrupt. A country's the same way. Country's not the same way. I mean, they're different. He's right about a company. I'll leave that to him. But it shows that really smart, really rich people don't understand monetary policy and fiscal policy. So here's the best analysis, Matthew, and I hope I don't sound heretical, but deficits don't really matter unless you put them in the context of growth. The national debt doesn't really matter unless you put it in the context of GDP. So you can't just say, oh, it's 38 trillion. It's a big number. Yeah, it is a big number. The question is it scary or not? Is it dangerous or not? And to answer that question, you have to compare the debt to GDP. Now, right now, it's at an all-time high. That's a bad thing, and it impedes growth, and we need to fix that. So I agree with that. You have about $38 trillion of debt, and GDP is about 27 trillion. So it's, let me do the math, it's like 125%, give or take, the highest in U.S. history. All you have to do to fix the problem is you have to grow the debt more slowly. We're not going to have surpluses for the foreseeable future. The debt's not going to get paid off. It doesn't have to get paid off. It does have to get rolled over. And that's the key to sustainability. Will the market absorb additional treasury debt? Right now, the market is hungry for that debt. They can sell as much as they can print. So what you have to do, you have to get the deficits down to around 3% of GDP. Then you have to get growth up to real growth, about 3% of GDP. And then you have 2% inflation. I don't like inflation any more than anyone else, but 2% is the Fed's target. So 3 plus 2, I promise the math will be simple. 3 plus 2 is 5. So 3% real growth plus 2% inflation is 5% nominal growth. And in this analysis, you look at the number, it's a nominal analysis. So if the deficit and additional debt is growing at 3% a year, and the economy is growing 5% a year, 3 real plus 2 nominal. What does that mean? It means the debt is growing more slowly than the economy, which means the debt to GDP ratio is going down, and that's what you want. And believe me, if you get to that, this is what Scott Bessent wants. He called it the 3 arrows before he was named Secretary of the Treasury. I haven't heard 3 hours lately, but 3 hours lately. But it's 3% deficits, 3% real growth plus 2 inflation, and 3 million barrels of oil a day. He called it the 3 hours. If you can do that, the markets will cheer. The Treasury will be able to sell all the debt they want. Now, it's not easy. The math is easy. Doing it is not easy. But my point is, you're never going to pay off the debt, and you're not going to make the deficits go away. You just have to grow deficits more slowly than you grow the economy, and that will solve the problem.
So, Jim, I love all that. Now distill that down for all the normies in the audience that say, all right, but like, I feel like the system's rigged against me. Like, what can I do? This debt is out of control. What's the best way for them to go through and survive, if not even thrive, for what's coming next?
Right. I'll answer the question, Joe, but people will just roll their eyes. The best way is diversification. Everybody goes, oh, we know that, diversification, yeah. But they actually don't know what it means. People say, I run into people, well, I'm diversified. I've got 50 stocks in 10 different sectors, semiconductors, minerals and mining, consumer non-durables. I'm fully diversified. And I say, no, you're not. You may have 50 stocks in 10 sectors, but you have one asset class. It's called stocks. And when they go down, they're all going to go down together. So that's not diversification. Have a slice of stocks, sure. Have a considerable slice of cash. Warren Buffett has $325 billion of cash, the most ever at Berkshire Hathaway. Why do you think he has $1/3 trillion in cash? Because he can see what's coming. Have a slice of gold. I recommend 10%, seasoned to taste. And gold is an inflation hedge, but that's not the main reason to have it. Gold is what I call the everything hedge. It hedges inflation, also hedges geopolitical risk, social breakdown, potential for war, hedges a lot of things, and it belongs in every portfolio. And then, have your alternative, treasury notes, a 10-year treasury note. They've been going down in price lately. When yields go up, prices go down. It's, like a seesaw. So lately, 10-year treasury note yields have been going up, but they're probably close to a cyclical peak, and they're going to start to go down. So you can have big capital gains on your 10-year treasury notes. If that's a little too volatile, look at the 5-year or the 2-year note. So treasury notes, cash, gold, and some stocks. I like defense and energy and a few other sectors. That's a diversified portfolio, and that will serve you very well.
Not just a 60-40. I like it. Jim Rickards, always one of the best voices out there. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Well, don't go anywhere. When we come back, it's going to be some of our other favorites in Washington, D.C. We'll have Chris Bedford and Rachel Bovard right after this. It's been 5 years already since the George Floyd riots back there in Minneapolis. And BlazeTV just dropped something that you have to see. For the first time ever, there are 3 current cops on the Minneapolis police force. They're still in uniform, still in the force, and they want to come out and break their silence and tell you about what really went down back in the summer of love, right? We have there the 3rd precinct. It was abandoned. It was burned. It was all the mostly peaceful protests that they were telling you about. They're speaking anonymously now to tell you what happened with Derek Chauvin, Governor Walz, and all the chaos that followed. And they said that Chauvin was set up. They said that Walz failed them, and the city that swore to protect them actually turn their back on them. So you can watch the first 10 minutes for free right now on YouTube. Just search BlazeTV Minneapolis. But if you want to see the full unfiltered investigation, you have to be a Blaze TV subscriber. So head over to blazetv.com/BNT and get $20 off your subscription. You'll sign up and support unrelenting journalism and see what the media won't show you. It's blazetv.com/BNT. The big, beautiful bill might have caused a colossal blowout between Elon Musk and Donald Trump, but it's still stuck in the Senate. Trump is working tirelessly to get his agenda passed, but he still needs congressional approval. Chris Bedford had the chance to sit down with one of Washington's biggest brains to break down the workings of the upper chamber.
Welcome back to the show, Rachel Bovard, the Vice President of Programs at the Conservative Partnership Institute and a longtime good friend of Blaze News, The Mandate. Rachel, thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So you're the person I call all the time when I need someone to be a seer on the Senate. The Senate is not unlike the clergy or the military, something that if you haven't spent years in, then you'll never really truly understand. This is the problem with Jake Sherman's reporting. Now, what is going on with reconciliation? It seems to me, and I've heard and I've been able to report out, that the House Republicans Ways and Means Committee did work closely with Senate Finance and actually trying to figure this out and really trying to hammer out what the details would be so there were no big surprises in the tax package that came through. That's one of the more delicate things here. But now we're talking about changes, which may be out of the chairman's hand, may have to do with the members. Some of those changes include taxes for taking the 5-year sunset on tax breaks for small businesses and making those forever. That fits really well into Republican orthodoxy of we will need to allow the incentive structure for businesses who succeed and they need some reliance. And that's going to cost money to not have that continue to last. It's going to push the rules very hard. They're going to have to figure out different ways to make that work. And right now they're looking at some of the president's campaign promises, some of the things that he has been touting that are going to suffer for this, whether it's taxes on overtime and how they want to handle that. And also this seemingly very pro-family idea, but certainly not in Republican orthodoxy, to allow these Trump accounts to be formed when newborn American citizens come here to help them with the child care and the cost of living. So is this just a case of the U.S. Senate doing whatever it always wants to do and sticking to its kind of Laffer curve orthodoxy at the expense of populism? Or is there something more nuanced going on here?
Well, there's a couple of things happening, and the first thing that you have to understand, sort of as a meta-narrative of this entire conversation, is that the Senate is a lagging indicator for the Republican base. They are consistently 10 years behind the rest of the country, probably
Shocking.
more. Right, and a little bit of that is by design, right? But when it comes to this tax conversation, it's very clear that that's happening. You see the House trying to institute a number of President Trump's more populist tax priorities, from no tax on tips, to the new tax credit for newborns, to focusing on small business, where the Senate tax writers, so the Senate Finance Committee, is very focused on what they will call pro-growth tax policies for the business community. And this is very traditional Republican economic theory, right? You help businesses, that trickle-down effect will expand jobs, grow the economy, make it better for everyone. That may in fact be true, but they are tilting the careful balance of the reconciliation bill by doing things like trying to make business expensing permanent, tweaking the R&D tax credit, doing things that the business community wants. And that creates a level of certainty for businesses that they are really asking for. And so that is what I'm assuming the Senate Republicans, when the Finance Committee Republicans were at the White House this week talking to Trump, they're talking specifically about those issues and also about the SALT deduction, which, if you've been following this debate, was very contentious in the House.
The SALT caucus.
The SALT caucus, and what it's referring to, right, is the ability for blue states to deduct from their property taxes from their federal taxes. So in effect, it is red states subsidizing the very high tax rates of blue states. And that's a lot of money. It's roughly, I think, $350 billion that red states send to blue states every year as a result of this deduction. The House Republicans have a constituency for this because it's New York and California. The Senate Republicans do not. And so that is a chit they're trying to move around the board and say, if you want us to protect this for the House, then you're going to have to give us something over here. So that's, the broad outlines of the negotiation that's going on right now.
So almost no House Republicans wanted to get to $40,000 on this SALT write-off for blue states. They did it because they had to. The House Freedom Caucus basically had to swallow its tongue to get through that negotiation process, and they had loved the fact that they were punishing the blue states, especially since these SALT tax deductions are only hitting people who are making huge amounts of money, much more than the average Trump voter, I'll tell you that. So the reason they came to this conclusion is because they had to. Well, at least they seemed like they had to. They were going to lose 20 votes if they didn't find cuts elsewhere to try and balance this out. Is this just a matter of the Senate having no Republicans from wealthy blue states, or is it because the senators are just islands who don't really care at all what the House of Representatives thinks or does?
Well, it's both, right? The Senate doesn't care about what the House thinks at all. But also it's the fact that, they have no constituency for this. And the SALT deduction is an extremely parochial issue. Right? This is extremely limited to blue states, of which we still have some Republican House members, but we have 0 Republican senators really affected by this. And they're also put off by the idea that their red states should have to subsidize these blue states. So it's a little bit of both. But the other tax issue at play here that I think is pretty interesting, getting away from the business side, is what's going to happen with the gains the House made in clawing back the Inflation Reduction Act. If you remember this, the Green New Deal, or as Chip Roy calls it, the Green New Scam, billions of dollars went into renewable energy tax credits across the country. The House Freedom Caucus at the last minute was able to wrangle some gains there, some policies that said, no, if you've received these tax credits, but you're not 5 years into using them, or, you started construction, all these things, then that money is being clawed back. And this is billions of dollars. Senate moderates on the Republican side, Jerry Moran, Tom Tillis, Joni Ernst, Chuck Grassley, people who have a lot of renewable energy in their states, are out there saying, oh, no, what the House did was too much. We like this Biden policy. We want to keep it. And so there's an active debate going on there. And that, I actually think, is the tipping point for the House. You have SALT on the table, but you also have, if the Senate moves away from the gains that the House made and clawing back that Biden policy, I think it fails in the House.
Is this more just Senate, an old school Republican obsequiousness to businesses? I mean, I think the argument that they're making is, well, businesses took these credits and they relied on them to expand in markets that didn't exist, that were highly politicized, that always had a risk of collapsing because they were fake and propped up by a Democratic president and the Democratic power for a period of time. But they made these investments. Some of them are donors to us, and we don't want to disrupt their business operations? Or is their argument just that they don't like conservative policy?
Well, I think it's a little bit of the business side, and it's a fair argument, and the House conservatives tried to account for it, right? They said, if you've received these tax credits, you're 5 years into construction, you actually put money, your own skin in the game, as a result of these tax credits, okay, you're grandfathered in, right? You cannot pull the rug under businesses that have already made, permanent and tangible financial decisions around them. It's unfortunate, but it's also fair. What they're saying is, if you've received these tax credits, but no construction decisions have been made, you haven't put any, real sweat equity into the thing, then we're pulling them back. And as a future matter, you cannot now apply for these credits. And I think that should be acceptable to most Republicans, right? You want to respect the business decisions that have been made, but you want to claw back this, what we call the Green New Scam, where people haven't been using it, it should come back. And so I do think that is a very, very important hot stove moment for the House. If the Senate tweaks that too much, I think that's going to be a big problem for House conservatives.
It kind of reminds me of the taxi medallion argument. I used to argue with libertarians about this. The government created a fake market in New York, and people were spending $1 million a year in order to be able to drive a taxi. And then they just decided to allow Uber in and completely change the market. If you're going to invent a market wholesale, then at least allow people to make some kind of business decisions based on that. But it doesn't seem tenable to the House of Representatives. So you got the SALT thing going on. You've got the child tax credit, or the child savings account thing going on. What are some of the other major fights that we're looking at where the Senate appears to be playing a really dangerous game of Jenga with a very delicately put together House bill. And by all reports, the president doesn't seem to have the Senate Republicans back on a lot of this stuff. He just wants to be able to sign something before July 4th.
And it's understandable because this is the bulk of his legislative agenda is in this bill, because you've got a ton of money for the border. You've got a little bit of border policy in there. You've got increased defense spending for the Hawks, that the administration has promised to use wisely. You've got the architecture of Trump's entire tax policy from his first term. So there is a lot in this bill that, from the president's mindset, has to pass. And so I think what the Senate Republicans are tinkering around the edges with in tax, there may be some negotiation they can come to at the House on permanent business expensing and things like that. But I think if they start to change tax policy too much, if they pull back the more populist elements, in particular the no tax on tips, or the newborn tax credits, or especially the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act gains the House made, that I think is really going to change the calculus of the very slim majority that the House has. And it's possible the bill collapses under its own weight. I hope that doesn't happen. I do think a lot of this can be worked out, but sometimes in politics, these things don't get worked out until the bill hits the floor, right? And that's why you see these insanely long votes, hours long, and the whipping is going on the floor, and the favor trading and the chits and all of that. That's politics, at its best, I guess, in some respect. But some of this stuff won't be worked out, I think, until the day of.
I just took a kid's field trip to the Capitol, and all the kids thought the coolest thing was the speaker's balcony. I thought the coolest thing was being allowed on the floor, because as a reporter, that had not happened to me before. I got to be the chaperone. Now, speaking of the floor, what is going on with confirmations? We heard repeatedly from the majority leader that this Senate had set records. A large part of that was because they got rid of the filibuster years ago, on Trump's appointees to his top posts in his cabinet. But that backlog was 70, 80. If he hasn't set a record yet, then he's about to set a record for how many people have not been confirmed into key positions in the Trump administration. What's holding this back, and what's going on?
This is one of the most infuriating things for me to watch. As of yesterday, there are 94 nominations sitting on the Senate's executive calendar. And there's a lot of complex procedures in the Senate, right, that limit what you can do, things that can stop other things, the filibuster on the legislative side. None of that exists when it comes to nominations anymore. There is one thing the Senate has to do to confirm these nominations, and it's called scheduling the vote and staying in town to confirm them. And for whatever reason, Senate Republicans just do not prioritize these nominations. Instead, what they prioritize is their 2.5-day work week that starts on Monday night and ends on Thursday at noon. And as a result of that, as a direct result of their laziness, these nominees are not getting confirmed. And the reason that this is so vitally important is because we saw in President Trump's first term what happens when he does not have his people scattered throughout the agencies, these political appointees. The bureaucracy runs amok. They do whatever they want. They're not beholden to the political appointees above them. These are the people sitting on the Senate's calendar waiting for confirmation. And these are agency appointments. These are executive branch appointments. They can be confirmed quickly and at simple majority. Down the road, the Senate's going to have a lot to do, right? They have reconciliation, they have a number of legislative priorities, but they also have to confirm judges coming up here in a few months. Once these judges are on the calendar, the Senate will do everything they can to confirm them because they love judges. These agency employees will get the shaft, right? They will be put on the back burner further than they already are. And you can envision a scenario now where someone that is nominated, in June of this year, of 2025, doesn't get confirmed until maybe 2 years later. And I'm sorry, that's simply unacceptable. That's absolutely unacceptable.
I can get why the Democrats might think this. Some of them have to commute from Hawaii or Oregon or Washington or California. Republicans don't have that commute. And the senior senator from Utah, I may have one of the longest ones, wants to stay in for a longer work week. So there's no excuse. Rachel Bovard, I know you're pressed for time, a very busy person. Thank you for coming and illuminating us on what is going on in this upper chamber of the legislature. We hope you come back soon.
Happy to do it. Thanks for having me.
What do you get when you mix two rising GOP stars, a 20-year plan, and a lot of talk about bringing American jobs back? Well, we have Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Vice President J.D. Vance. They're laying out a blueprint for American renewal, and it is absolutely necessary. MP, in D.C., they can't even pass a budget, right? It's just a series of continual resolutions that fund the government. So this is a nice departure from that. People are actually planning for the future. So I'll take it right now. A 20-year plan? Absolutely count me in.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is music to my ears and very refreshing, I think, for anyone who's serious about saving America, because what you have in this dynamic duo with Rubio, Secretary of State, and the Vice President, who's very young and active, in J.D. Vance, I mean, they become super friends. They are working very well together. People talk about them competing to be, the next president or whatever. But all of that is really ridiculous. These two guys are very serious about moving the party forward and moving America forward. So what's exciting about this to me is that if you are a serious person and you look at the problems we have, okay, what does citizenship mean? Can you have unity among citizens in this country when we have these serious disagreements, when we just dumped, 15, 20 million random people into the country? These are really serious problems that will not be solved in 4 years, never mind 2 years. That's just fundamentally the case. We will not solve problems of this magnitude in that period of time. So what is lacking in contemporary political life are people who are thinking long term. What are we fighting for? What does the American way of life look like in the 21st century? What should it look like? What are we actually fighting for, and how long will that take? So this long-term vision for American revival is a breath of fresh air, and pay attention to what these guys are saying, because they're serious and this is the way forward.
I loved when he was on the campaign trail, J.D. Vance would talk about the American dream so many times. And it was one of the things that I just kept hearkening back to and just saying, man, in the 4 years that we had Joe Biden as president, it was really hard to find any hope. Mm-hmm. And the fact that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance would say, hey, the American dream is still available. It's still an option for people in this country. I thought that was so powerful and absolutely necessary for the moment that we had going into this election.
Yeah, and it's starting to put some meat on the bones of what that means, right? What is the American dream moving forward? But the first thing you have to do is give people hope, right? And really what we need is a real clear vision of what that looks like. So when these people talk about this, I mean, what Vance is talking about is reindustrialization, right? Bringing back our ability to manufacture things, which will be new. Then it won't look like it did in the past, right? It will involve a lot of automation and robots, but you're still going to need a lot of people involved in reshoring and us being able to make the things we need to make here. Well, guess what? That's going to take a long time. That's a 20-year project. You also ultimately are trying to provide dignified work, and you're trying to improve the actual way of life on a day-to-day basis for Americans. What does that look like? Well, you see people rethinking that with MAGA all the time. That's a very serious endeavor. So it's all about, like, what does the American dream actually look like in the future? What can we attain? And then let's shoot for that, and let's make that the goal, and let's make the goal actually winning. And what actually winning means, that's going to take a while. That's going to take, a decade or two or more. This is why I love this. I mean, it's actual statesmanship.
That's literally what I was going to say. They're actually doing the statesmanship, right? Like, people like to talk about it all the time, but they're actually doing it right now. Yes, and so these are two of the most serious, serious guys around in all of American politics right now, and really all of American culture. So it's very important stuff. I encourage you to go to Blaze and read this article. It's up here. Rubio and Vance outline the work of a generation. And start thinking about this 20-year project, because it also in your personal life will give you hope for, wait a minute, what should I be aiming at, right? What am I trying to achieve? And we all get into kind of sleepy zones where we don't think about that enough. And I think right now America wants to hear what that 20-year plan is, and these guys are building it. This is such a departure from the Elon Musk social media stuff. This is the actual plans that could go through and make America great again. Let's end this weekend on a high note. We'll have the clip of the week featuring J.D. Vance right after this. The political class is stereotyped as being high-minded snobs who have never met a blue-collar American in their life. However, that mold might have been broken by Vice President J.D. Vance in our clip of the week.
There are politicians out there who they've just been politicians. But you are someone who was an intellectual first. Some people don't like the word intellectual, but I mean it in the good sense of the term. You were writing for National Review. You were at the bar late at night arguing about and helping shape these ideas that you are now.
I come here for free and you insult me and you call me an intellectual.
Remind
me that I wrote for National Review. What this guy is.
That's fair. I will admit that I too wrote for National Review.
I love so many things about that. One, because JD Vance is just like us. Every time that you see JD, he's just out there, and his posture in the chair and him just kind of listening to the question as it comes. And he's like, man, I'm here. Like, I'm the vice president of the United States, and this is what we're going to go back and forth with. So is he the new generation of leaders here for the party?
Yeah, absolutely. He is the preeminent new generation of leaders. You know, he's the role model in a way. And it is interesting. I mean, when you think about the word intellectual, the new right has lots of intellectuals. Orrin Cass is one of them, and he's right. J.D. Vance is one of them too. But in a populist movement, right, there's a little bit of tension there because J.D. Vance is an outlier. And so he's mad about National Review because National Review turned anti-Trump, right? And he had written for National Review, but J.D. has sort of evolved his views over time. So what he should have mentioned is the fact that he published in The American Mind for the Claremont Institute, where I published him in an article called Ending the Globalization Gravy Train, which was very outside the box and very J.D. Vance. And he ended up, going on Tucker and speaking about that issue. He has been a part of what you can call the new right from the very beginning. And I think everything about him is, I mean, look how young he is, right? I mean, he's just way younger than a lot of these old fogies out there. But every part of him, it represents the New Deal moving forward. So there's actually a lot resting on, JD's shoulders because he is emblematic of where this movement goes from here.
I kind of hate how young he is. I think that it makes me feel like, okay, we should all be doing a little bit more if J.D. Vance is like, oh, well, I came through and I was a senator and now I'm just going to be the vice president of the United States. No big deal, everybody. What have you done with your life?
No, there is a bit of that. I mean, he's one of these wonderkinds. Like he just, he went through the Ivy League deal and, but he also, was in the military and went into, some interesting finance stuff before running for Senate. So look, this is a time-honored path in American society. What's interesting about him is I think he ultimately turns a traitor to that elite world in a way because of his background. And he sort of looks around and mistakes what's going on with Trump at first. And then he looks a little closer and he realizes, oh my gosh, this is the right way to go. And then he contributed over the last few years to this movement, to rethinking what people on the right were trying to accomplish. So look, this is someone who is smart, who is talented, who has a varied background, who actually came up out of the central part of America and rose. And he's not going anywhere, and he's really entering his prime. He's just entering his prime. No one's talking about how much he's doing as a vice president, and the power that Rubio and Vance have within the administration is immense. I mean, they are the cool kids, and they're moving forward. So this is a great thing, right? And the watching this is just a joy, and this is where the gravity, is moving forward.
Now, normally we'd only have one clip of the week on Fridays, but we knew that we had something special yesterday. So here is our bonus clip of the week.
I'm asking you if you're a covert white supremacist, which according to one of your own organizations, again, denial of racism constitutes covert white supremacy. Would you like to answer the question?
I don't know what the question is.
So you refuse to answer whether you are a covert white supremacist.
I am here to talk about the essential work that nonprofits do. If you'd like to ask me a question,
I am utterly dumbfounded. You are on record right now, and you will not say that you are not a covert white supremacist?
As I told Congressman Gill yesterday when he was on the show with us, We completely changed the format of the show because Fridays are now the clip of the week because there are so many good things that we want to get in. And it's mainly because there are so many good Brandon Gill clips. Like, he has been producing moneymaker after moneymaker out there in D.C.
Yeah, look, if young Congressman Gill can also learn to legislate and all the other things that Congress people do, right, he will be an incredible force for decades because he's only been there a short period of time, and he's just banger after banger. And this question is really important, right? Because this is at the heart of all this wokeness, is the claim, and it puts it all, it's a race, it's based on race hatred. That's what DEI is based on. And the question is, that their assertion is, right, that if you say you're not a racist, you are a covert white supremacist because you have to bow down and admit, your racism. So, of course, they don't like to be asked that question, as we spoke with him, and that was something that gets right to the heart of their absurdity. He's doing a great job of this, and we want him to keep on pushing.
Yeah, and Brandon Gill is the youngest Republican in the freshman class.
Good sign.
And that is a good sign. And J.D. Vance, the other thing that I loved about him is, if you remember back on Inauguration Day, well, there was something else that was going on that day. It was called the National Championship game for his Ohio State Buckeyes. And I loved that he was like,
yes,
okay, I get it. I'm going to be the vice president here, but I also need to make sure that my Buckeyes win the Natty. And and it's just like, this is the young generation of Republicans. And if they continue to be just, I feel like there's an authenticity about these two in particular. And if this is the people that we're going to have leading us into the future, it feels pretty good right now.
Oh, yeah. And look, what we need to do is build the media ecosystem that helps further their stardom, because they are stars. I mean, these are bright political stars. And if the situation was reversed, the left would have them all over popular culture and all the late night talk shows and all that sort of thing. And that's the challenge next. Build the media ecosystem for these people to shine in, because they really are shining bright right now. And, unfortunately, most people are still watching all of this through like a muddy glass, right? That is all the muck of legacy media. So we have, but the good news is we have the star power. We have some smart people who are talented moving forward, and those pieces are now in play on the chessboard for the American right, and that's a good thing.
And we're going to be back out there in Washington, D.C. next week. We're going to be out there starting on Wednesday and giving you guys updates about what's going on, because we went all the way from the Post-it notes on the door there in the White House just saying, this is the meeting room for scheduling, right? Like, they had no idea yet. The things weren't in place, and now we're seeing that skeleton crew get a little bit more filled out. I can't wait to see just the updates this time around in Washington, D.C.
Yes, I mean, look, there still are people like coming in first day on the job. It takes a while to put things together, but for the most part, right, the gang is together. So we can't stay away because we got to know what's going on, and there's so many people to catch up with and stuff to find out. So it's going to be a blast. And I have to say, like we've said it over and over in the show, Washington, D.C. is a totally different place than it was a year ago.
Yeah, it definitely feels more safe now than it ever has before. The unfortunate thing is, I don't think there's going to be a happy hour with Elon this time.
It's too bad. We just missed it last time, Jill. We were almost there at the happy hour with Elon.
So close.
But,
Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you back here on Monday.